Nothing can save us from that movie, The Big Easy. Nothing. There's nothing. There's nothing. There's nothing anybody can tell me and say, "Oh well, you know, he had this pressure or that pressure." Yeah, I'm not gonna. I'm not sorry. I don't buy it.
So, Glen Pitre, you've been I'm trying to think of the right term. I don't know if legend is the right word, but you've been a director.
I never know, what do you do for a living? I go, it's been a lot of that.
But
I tell stories.
You tell stories, all right, and that's very evident by your website, for your production company, Cote Blanche. I mean, you tell stories in many media. Obviously, what I came across knowing you from was from your movies. One of my earliest recollections was, of course, your first big movie, Belisaire the Cajun, that came out in 1986. And then I've seen some of your other work since then. But I've also you've done feature films, written, directed, a lot also, and produced with your wife,
Michelle.
Yeah, I've done a lot in the last almost 40 years, and well, of course, your career started before that because you were born and raised in cut off.
Founded Cote Blanche in 1975, so it'll be 50 years next. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
In my college dorm room.
Okay.
No kidding.
So that's name is that named after the bay out near you, or was it?
No, but it's a good story.
Okay.
I come from a town called Cutoff, Louisiana. At least that's what it's called on the maps. But even a place like Cutoff has its sections, and I come from the section of Cutoff known as Cote Blanche. And the reason it was called Cote Blanche, so sad, was back in the day, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. It was the custom on Bayou to paint the front of your house, really just the front, the gaudiest color you could find.
Okay.
And the same was true in the river parishes.
Right. I've heard that.
Say you could sail down the Mississippi and tell what language was spoken in each plantation, because if it was white, they spoke English. If it was colored, they spoke French.
Right.
Well, by Lafourche, it was colorful house after colorful house after colorful house, till you got to this one section which had been settled by the refugees, the survivors of the great hurricane of 1893, who had lived on the coast in a town of 3,000 people. Half of them drowned one night, October 1st, 1893. And the survivors scattered, and this town of Golden Meadow was founded by the survivors, West Wego, across from Mississippi. And then this section of Cutoff where a plantation had just been subdivided. So there were narrow tracts people could buy, and they settled there, but they couldn't afford paint. So they had to whitewash the front of their houses. And it was definitely very striking. You'd be coming down the bayou seeing this rainbow of houses, and then all of a sudden every house was white.
Wow.
Yes, Cote Blanche, the white, the white coast, but coast in the sense of the banks of the stream.
Yeah, because when I was trying to, I mean, obviously the German coast has got its name up there, and I've heard of like the Golden Coast, and I was trying to think why it was white down there, but now I know. So
white because they were poor.
Yeah. Well, I know the similar story because our family had ties with like Laurel Plantation, and with the Wagaspack family that purchased it in Heidel's afterwards. And so when I've gone on tours there, they've told that same story, that back, I guess, in the late 1890s and stuff, when they acquired it, they started going to where they were painting it white because of the English speakers as opposed to the colorful Creole background. And then when Norman Mamillion took it over and was restoring it, he found all these layers of paint underneath it and restored it back to what they figured it would have looked like back in the day when it was originally built in the mid 1800s, or when it was mostly being run.
When Norman first ventured into that, I was one of his founding board members for the
Okay, cool.
plantation. But I mean, it wasn't me, it was him. He was a force of nature. Miss him big time.
Oh yeah, yeah. I had a pleasure of talking to him one afternoon driving home from work, and of course I drive up north of Mobile, so it takes me about an hour. So I was going through some areas where it kind of broke up on me. So I really wish I could have recorded it, because he had just a real great story of how he got to where he was, especially with Laura and all that. So you mentioned you founded this in your college dorm room, and you went away a little bit further away from Cutoff than to go to college, and even further than New Orleans.
Yeah, went a long ways, and it was healthy. It was healthy to get away and get a perspective, and I came back, but just to see the place I'd grown up through a different lens. Because when you grow up in a place like that, I mean, you don't know any different. You might see different images on television, but I mean, you kind of assume that this is the world and this is everybody's world. And when you leave it, hey, this place was a little bit different. This was a little, it's a corner of America, but it's a corner of America that at once was very modern, but at the same time was very, very, hanging on to traditions. And before we went on air, we're talking about some of the foods, some of the plants we grew, which don't get grown a lot of places, don't get eaten a lot of places.
Yeah.
And you learn to appreciate stuff.
Yeah. So this was, for those who don't know, you went to Harvard, and I guess the curiosity or the question was, was there any particular reason you chose Harvard, or was it?
They chose me. They offered the best scholarship, so I went.
Okay. So you had a little bit of culture shock going up there, I assume.
Oh, you can imagine.
Yeah, and I guess sort of to that point about, like you said, moving away and seeing things through a different lens. My parents moved away before I was actually born. They moved from the River Parish, as my grandparents had moved to Metairie, and so they grew up in Metairie, and then I grew up in Texas, and then we ended up in Mobile. And so I was always kind of interested in my history and trying to find connection through that. And then Jeremy moved away in the early mid 90s.
Yeah, mid 90s.
Yeah, and he moved out to where you spent closer to where you spent a lot of time. You first moved San Francisco, right?
Yeah, I moved to the Bay Area, and I was there for a while. Yeah, with Glenn, he's in New Orleans, so we're sitting here lamenting the fact that we can't get good food. He's right in the heart of it. I mean, it's like, we should be. No, you know what, David? We're not going to do this. We're not talking about food. I haven't had lunch yet.
I'm a pretty good cook. I can talk about food for a while.
No, I have this really bad habit of not eating before we record, and we always end up talking about food. Our last interview that we did, or actually 2 interviews we did with Chef Jeremy Langlois from Homa's House, just completely set me off edge by the end. We were so hungry by the end. So anyway, all right. Wait, but you make a good point. You make a good point, David.
A couple of weeks back, a buddy of mine and I were chatting, and he was complaining about, he's, so busy these days, he's living on leftovers. And I think, well, I'm kind of living on leftovers too. And then I realized, let's see, this morning I had a leftover stuffed bell pepper. Lunch I had leftover crab fricassee.
How do I mute Glenn here?
Well, I had leftover pastalaya, which I know there's some controversy there, but
pastalaya.
Yeah.
What is pastalaya? Yeah, I know.
You never heard of so there's been a whole sorry, Jeremy, I got to do this. So
I got to know what pastalaya is.
Well, apparently there's been a trend in the last, because everybody knows what jambalaya is. And the story is that somebody, I think I've been able to trace it at least to the 90s or maybe even the mid 80s, where the legend or lore is that they were in a fishing camp. They wanted to make jambalaya. They looked in the pantry and all they had was pasta, spaghetti noodles, not any rice. So they made the jambalaya, as you make your soup at the beginning, and they just threw their noodles in, and all of a sudden this new Cajun dish was born.
There's
And
nothing new about that. I grew up with that. My parents grew up with that. My grandparents grew up with that. We didn't call it pastalaya. It was when you cook pasta, spaghetti noodles, whatever.
Yeah.
And put a sauce over it. In Cajun, in French, we call that and macaroni.
Yeah, macaroni.
Macaroni.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
But if you cooked the pasta in the sauce, that was a macaronade. And we did that over. It's one of the first things I learned to cook, because on the shrimp boat, there was a real premium on having as few pots as possible, because you have to clamp them down because you're on a boat.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you try to cook everything in one pot. And so, but it was called the macaronade. But that was, my grandparents made that all the time.
Well, that's the anyway, that's a popular name that we've learned it by in recent times. Pastalaya.
It's old is new again. That's what's happening.
And so now your description actually would lend more credence to the fact that some of the people who are complaining it not being Cajun is going to say, well, that they didn't have pasta. They weren't cooking that in the, this is somebody who's a little younger than us. We're both in our 50s and he's probably in his 40s. He's the big proponent against it. But the main thing is that, pasta's been in South Louisiana at least 130 years or so, at least, I'm sure.
And I can't speak to, life on the prairies, around Lafayette, that area. But on the bayous of Southeast Louisiana, there was always connection to New Orleans, and New Orleans was full of noodle factories. There were lots of them. And it's a food that keeps. Remember pre-refrigeration.
Yeah. You make an excellent point.
You're going to get weevils in your flour, but you're not going to get them in your pasta so much. So
that's true. Well, that's what I thought about the river parish. Is one of the things that they had the advantage of is, and I'm sure like a lot of places, they had the waterway, obviously the Mississippi River, and they could have the Acadian influence or the Cajun influence, if you want to call it, but you also had the Creole or the transit coming up and down the Mississippi between New Orleans. So they got the best of all the different cooking styles, from what I could tell.
And we're quick to adapt them.
Oh,
we're quick to adopt anything good. It wasn't.
Well, so you'll have to look that up and see how it compares to the memories that you have of the other foods.
Pastalaya.
Pastalaya, yeah. So
we
you
were
in
DJ Rhett.
So what I was trying to understand, so when you graduated, because it was Bel-Azer the Cajun, was that part of your graduate or your undergraduate work, or was that something you did totally different?
That was after. Actually, the movie I did as my college thesis was called La Fièvre Jaune. It's all in Cajun French.
Okay.
And a couple of years out of school, I did another one called Huit Piastres et Demi, again, all in Cajun French. And thought they were lost because the lab that had the master, the video masters, everything got 9 feet of water in Katrina.
Oh, wow.
And so had a DVD made from a VHS, made from a scratchy print after it had run into the theaters and had some breaks that had been spliced and everything.
Yeah.
Just last year, the Golden Globes Foundation, same Golden Globes put on the award show.
Yeah.
The Golden Globes Foundation gave a grant to this nonprofit in New York to restore films that were, what was the wording? Something, milestones of American independent film. And anyway, these two are among those that got chosen. And so they got restored, and they found negatives in the state archives in Louisiana. They found negatives at the UCLA Film Archives. They found stuff in private collections. They redid the picture in New York. They redid the sound in Los Angeles, put it all together. And they look better than they did when they first came out in they've hit theaters in
Yeah.
1981. It looked better than it ever looked in the
Wow.
theaters. It's like, 4K restoration and everything else.
Wow.
But anyway, that one, La Fièvre Jaune, was my senior thesis. I mean, it wasn't graduate. I never went to graduate school, but like my senior college thesis. That was the first one. And like, I went down in New York to try to find a distributor for it. And nobody wanted to even talk to me because it was black and white. It was in Cajun French with subtitles. It starred my family. And then I was about to give up and head on back home. And somebody said, why don't you try Montreal? And so
made sense.
I'd never been to Montreal, but I'm going to give it a shot. So I think I hitchhiked, as a matter. Oh no, I had a Volkswagen by that point. I went my Volkswagen Bug up to Montreal. And sure enough, sold the film to Canadian TV. So like 5 weeks after graduation, I had money in my pocket. I figured, okay, I'm a movie producer. And I moved back and cleaned out the old cabane on the buyer side, and this was going to be my my offices of my production company, which they became. But within 3 months, I was working offshore because it was hard to make a living that way. Took a while.
That first one was about yellow fever. Was that the one I'm thinking?
It was a story my grandmother had told me about her father. There he was quarantined, and her father snuck around the quarantine to get back to his family because he'd been fishing at the sea, and sure enough, brought fever back with him.
Seems to me, like I said, you look at historical stories, and you set them in a period, and either tell them in the French of the time, or I guess depending upon.
As it got bigger, I switched to English because
And like I said, and I guess you do all, or not all, but it looks like to me a lot of the things are set on location. I mean, the location seems to be just as much a part of your stories as the stories underneath them too, and the authenticity to the to the areas.
Making a movie is, I mean, it's business, it's art. Each one's different. I mean, a movie's a movie, and office tower is an office tower, an office tower. But each time you're dealing with specific issues that come with it, depending on who's it for and what's it, where it is and how it's financed, and what all this stuff, what the story is for a movie, what the design is, I guess, for a building. I mean, so I have one movie that was about. It was set during the Thibodeau massacre of the 1880s, but we shot it in Texas because that's where like the producer said, we're shooting in Texas. Now, you write the checks, you call the shots at the end of the day.
Yeah. But I guess Louisiana had. I mean, I know there's a history of like the first Tarzan movie in South Louisiana, and then obviously in the late, I don't know if it was the 90s or early 2000s, the big, was it Hollywood South or whatever they were calling. A lot of movies are being filmed down there, and I mean it's interesting to watch something that's supposed to be set somewhere else, and all of a sudden I see the skyline of New Orleans, or I watch a bunch of the like watching the Expendables with Sylvester Stallone, seeing that and looking at the background, and or some of his other movies is like it doesn't say it's in New Orleans, but you can tell where it's at.
But absolutely. And sometimes those places are chosen and the story's adapted. Going back to the 80s, as you're talking about, remember the Big Easy?
Yeah.
Well, the
Jeremy's
Big Easy,
favorite.
the script for the Big Easy is set in Chicago.
Oh, really?
And the big showdown at the end is in the stockyards.
Okay.
And then for financial reasons, they wound up shooting in New Orleans and decided to change it to New Orleans and give your pal that great Cajun accent.
Yeah.
But, and other times, like you say, the Expendables, they'll shoot it here, but, it could be set in another place, or it could be set generically that you don't even know.
Yeah, they don't even identify it.
They
They don't say anything about it being in New Orleans.
In fact, when we were talking to Chef Jeremy Langlois, we were talking about Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte being filmed at Homa's house. And because the first time I saw it was right after I'd gone and done a tour there. And it was interesting because this would have been 2010. And then I was watching it, I guess it was like 1964, I think. And you can see the exact spot outside. And I'm thinking, wow, I know exactly where that is. And he says, yeah, he's watched it. And then sometimes they'll pan from one place to the other, like they're walking just across the hall. And in reality, it's around the corner from the house, or a totally different house altogether. So,
no, you do that. You do that. In 2000, I did a movie called The Smuggler's Wife. It's set during World War II. Home front, and
I've got one of those.
And we filmed in that dance hall. And filmed it. It had been used to like store old broken washing machines and refrigerators, the ones that never quite got fixed. And our art department went in and emptied it out and dressed it as it would have been, because in the story, it's the Sunday morning dance, and everybody's there when the news of Pearl Harbor comes. So we had all this cleared out, and we have Academy Award winner Tatum O'Neal's in there, and Tim Curry from Rocky Horror is the priest, and he's there, and then we got hundreds of extras in costume. But the outside didn't work because it's right on the highway.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And it's the only highway through town. And, you can block a highway for a little bit, but we had a lot of shit there. And so for the exterior, we found an old Woodsman of the World Hall in Gibson, which is, 40 miles away.
Oh, wow.
And so, a lot of the locals, commented on it and said that, but that's not it on the outside. I go, no, it's you gotta, it's again, very dangerous to watch a movie set in a place, because liberties have to get taken. And it's part of it.
You reminded me that when, so with talking about being from the Vacherie area, one of the guys that I got at, when I started really researching, I found there was like an online forum, and that's where I actually met Colin through that. And a lot of these older cousins, they would tell me about a lot of the traditions and the foodways of Vacherie. So that's how I got real interested in it. And one gentleman, Jerry Schecksnyder, would do these little, I think they're called sarama. They're little Malaysian chickens, but he had a show, and he would do it at like Oak Alley Plantation. And and I didn't realize there were so many people into growing these miniature chickens.
Miniature chickens?
Miniature, yeah, little tiny. But I guess like they're kind of like Cornish hens in size, but they got all kind of they're just differently displayed. I mean, just different kind of feathers. I mean, they got a lot of unique plumage to them.
So they're not grown for food. They're grown as
a show chicken. Yeah. Now I think Jerry.
I'm looking it up right now.
I think that what'll happen, what'll end up doing is that if any of them don't make the cut, they make the gumbo.
Cut.
Yeah, they make another type of cut.
I can do you one better. We had filmed a scene in the cemetery in Lockport, Louisiana.
Okay.
And it's probably 6 months later, and I get a call from the priest. And he says, "This is Glen Pitre." He goes, "Are you the one who did the movie?" I go, "Yeah." He says, I have a gentleman here who's very upset, says his parents' grave was stolen. And I can't figure out what's happening. And I thought, I'm trying everything. So I called you. I said, "Can you shed any light on it?" I go, "On stealing a grave?" And I could hear the guy in the background, and he's not yelling so much as weeping that, this is where they were. This is the tomb. And they're not, somebody else took it. They took the tomb. And finally it hits me, and I say, "Tell you what, Father, can you touch the front of the tomb?" He said, "There are different people in it." The guy here, there are different people. "Can you touch the front of the tomb?" He goes, okay, I've done it. I go, is it kind of soft? He said, yeah, it is kind of soft. I said, can you pick at it with your fingernail? He said, it's crumbling. I said, yeah, make a little hole and see if you can pull it away. Because what you do when you're filming, you don't want real people's names in the background.
Right. Right.
So the art department cuts out a little piece of styrofoam and paints it to look, paints it with tune paint and puts, gets a fake name and dates and stuff. And that's what they had done. And one of them got forgotten. And 6 months later, it's still sitting there. And the poor guy comes from Texas to visit his parents' grave. And they're different names. They're different names.
That was pretty funny.
And anyway, the priest pulls it off. And over the priest's phone, I hear the guy in the background says, I hear he goes, Mama!
That would be a good scene for a movie too, I would think. Yeah, and I guess that's the thing that Jeremy and I have been talking about with some of the other guests we've had in the past is that when he and I dabble into some of the things, mostly if I do any video work, I try to shoot food that I'm cooking or some gardening things. And when you really start thinking about it from a standpoint of somebody watching it, nobody wants to hear me just rambling on in my garden about something. So I start thinking about how do I cut away and make it to where it's concise and tells the story in a economical way. And so so sometimes if you look around my house, you'd think my yard is huge, but I've just tried to be creative in my camera shots.
Yeah. We have a saying that the film's not finished until there's blood on the editing room floor.
Well, yeah, it's called murdering your children or babies.
You have to cut because the audience is never going to be as invested or as interested as you are. You got to leave them wanting more, not just at the end, but scene by scene.
I got to imagine when you were doing this stuff, how did you, I'm thinking about, like, I read about how Spielberg chose his film stock for Poltergeist and for Raiders and stuff like that. How did you choose that? I mean, how did you go about figure? Was it just a budgetary thing, or was it
virtually always. I mean, you knew if you used Fuji stock, the reds were going to pop. Were going to pop, and if you used early stuff shot in 16 millimeter. You had, the reversal film, which didn't make a negative, made a positive.
Right.
Like old slides. Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Looked beautiful. Kodak, was the Paul Simon line of
Kodachrome.
Yep.
It was beautiful, but there was so little latitude. Your exposure had to be spot on, or you'd lose it.
Right.
So, I mean, you knew about all these things, but at the end of the day, I wasn't Spielberg, and I would be looking at film stock and thinking how much shrimp I had to catch and sell to pay for each reel. It was
it's expensive.
It was that first film was black and white, not because I was trying to be artsy. It was because black and white was cheaper.
Yeah.
I couldn't afford, I could afford, so many hours of footage to use in color and so many more hours if I shot black and white. So I shot black and white. Within a few years, labs stopped doing black and white, because everybody color. And I remember I had a gig and they wanted something that looked like a 1930s newsreel. So it was going to have to be black and white.
Right.
And I called the lab I used, and they kind of laughed. And I said, no, it really has to, said, no, shoot color. I said, no, it has to be black and white. And finally I got the president of the laboratory on the phone. And he says, well, I got good news and bad news. He said, the good news is we'll process your film in black and white and we won't even charge you. That's pretty good. It was the bad news. He goes, you have to wait for a bank robbery. What? Because back in the day, the security cameras in banks, You know, it
Right.
was like 16 millimeter film, and they do
Yeah.
a frame
Yeah.
like every 15 seconds,
Yep. Yep.
but they wouldn't process it unless it was a robbery, right? You know, in which
Oh.
case you wouldn't see the stuff. And when they did, you know, you had a little 100 feet of film, and you couldn't mix up the chemicals. You know, it was
Right.
enough chemicals to do. Yeah.
Oh,
So he
okay.
says, if we had a bank robbery, the bank's going to pay for all the processing. We just put yours in, and you know, nobody's the wiser about it. I
Right,
couldn't
sure.
wait. I couldn't wait for a bank robbery.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff I never thought about. With I mean, it's, and I guess that's the other aspect I was talking about with Jeremy and I would talk about whenever somebody, whether they're doing an instruction on how to cook and talk at the same time, or just making movies, a lot of people don't take into account all the things you've got to do to pull something off that we can enjoy. And it looks easy in a sense, but there's so many hours and
so much of it, so much of the result is happenstance.
Yeah.
You know, you know, they call you the director of the movie, but I mean, you're trying all you can to stay on the back of that Bronco as he jumps around the arena, because you know, the weather may not cooperate. If you're lucky, your cast and crew are very talented people, and thus are going to have their own ideas, and sometimes they're better than your ideas, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're just different and expensive, you know, or time consuming, and just talking them out is time consuming, and you know, every second is costing you, you know, money, because you get so many days to shoot the movie, and you don't get extra days. And if you have a full day or a partial day, that's your day. That's it. And you know, and some stuff you decide for one reason. A classic example. You talked about Belisaire earlier, and the ending of, I'm going to blow the ending for anybody who hadn't watched it. The ending has the hero and two of the lesser villains all up on the gallows together. It's going to be a triple hanging. And I remember the period, the Detroit Free Press, which was the big paper in Detroit, when reviewed the movie, did like a full page review when it opened there. But a lot of, you know, the reviewer was evidently some, you know, frustrated film writer, because it was all about the symbolism in the movie and this and that. And you know, the hero is a Christ figure, to the point that at the end he's there with, you know, in the center with the two guys mimicking the crucifixion. And I read that and I go, what? Because the reason we had the two guys is because we're shooting widescreen.
Right.
Yeah.
If you just had one, you know, your main character would be off to the side. So you put balance out, so you keep them in the middle.
Yeah.
And it was for purely technical reasons. It never dawned on me. But then I read this thing, and I read it a second time, and I go, well, maybe that was what I was thinking. I just didn't realize it. You know, maybe it was somewhere in
kind of subliminal.
You know, you don't know. You don't know. I mean, where does this stuff come from? You know, sometimes it's, you know, it's spur of the moment ideas that you know, and sometimes, you know, some, you know, production assistant who's, you know, make a minimum wage trying to get their toe into the business, and say, oh, what if y'all did da-da-da? And you go, that's a great idea that solves so many problems. We are going to do that.
Yeah. And that's great that y'all are able to collaborate like that. Yeah.
Well, and what you do as a director is filter all those ideas and try to keep it cohesive, try to get it all fitting together. I mean, you know, I drill on young filmmakers. You got to do homework. You got to do your homework. You got to know this thing backward and forward before you start. Not because it's going to turn out that way, because it ever does.
Right.
You got to know, so that when something pops up, you know where it fits into the overall. If it fits into the overall, if it doesn't fit, what needs to get adjusted? What else needs to get adjusted so it will? work out
Mhm.
because you're constantly adjusting, constantly adjusting, constantly.
Wow.
We were using the construction metaphor earlier. Movies are
Mhm.
one big change order.
Yeah.
Everything's switching all the
Yeah.
time, all the time.
So you're still teaching at LSU now?
Yeah, I am. It's
Is it
been 10 years.
10 years?
I'm,
Okay.
I'm there one day a week. I'm there
Okay.
one day a week and do 2 classes, and that's my week.
Okay.
But I really enjoy it. I really
Yeah.
enjoy it. Yeah.
Because I
In
saw y'all
fact,
had quite a few projects.
we're just finishing LSU's first student feature film that myself and one of the other faculty members produced. There are 17 writer directors.
Wow.
Yeah. And we had
Wow.
one overall story, and they all contributed scenes and directed their scenes. And,
Wow.
yeah.
How'd that go?
It was hairy at times. But the finished product, which is going to premiere in October, held up much. I mean, it's got certainly some technical rough edges because
Sure.
they're not Spielberg yet either.
Right.
Yeah.
And, so it's not the highest end equipment, and the crews are as green as they
Mhm.
come.
Right.
But that said, some great performances, and it holds together as a story, and I'm so proud of them. I'm so proud of them.
And then in addition to the work you do with LSU, what do you have? You live in you have like a firehouse studio that you rent out that
Yeah,
people
we
come and
have
can make.
it's a 1916 firehouse. It was built for the horse-drawn fire engines. In fact, the stables out back are still offices and editing rooms.
Okay.
And I'm based here, and some other filmmakers. The guy won the Grammy last year for best music video is based here, and then we have visiting people. Richard Linklater did his last movie Hitman that's on Netflix. They were
Okay.
they rehearsed here for 3 weeks before shooting. So I mean, people come and go, and it's used a lot. And then I do a lot of museum design.
Yeah, that's what I heard. You did
Yeah.
it's like a 360 type of video. I say 360 video, but I would listen to Poppy Tooker talk about it on her show.
Oh, that
the-
was, yeah. That one's called The French Quarter by Night. It's at
Yeah.
520 Royal Street in the Historic New Orleans Collection Gallery. And
Okay.
they commissioned my wife and I to give us a gallery and said, we want an immersive film about the history of the French Quarter.
Mhm.
And so it's all around you. You go through, you walk in one end and you leave out the other, but the film is projected all around you, and there are 10 channels of sound, and it takes you from forest primeval to the very last scene is the Croix de Vue Mardi Gras parade, which is the biggest parade that actually goes through the quarter, and you're embedded in it. It's literally all around you.
Wow.
And it runs 18 minutes and just repeats all day long. But that was filmed a lot of time. Like right now, I'm doing just finishing an exhibit on Huey Long's assassination for the old state capitol.
Okay.
And starting on a visitor center that's going to be like no other tourist visitor center you've ever seen. I guarantee. It's going to be wild.
I was going to ask you if you'd done anything with the river parishes, ever had anything filmed out there or any stories that you thought about?
We filmed chunks of we did this hour-long PBS documentary called Haunted Waters, Fragile Lands. And sort of looking at the southeastern corner of Louisiana as an example of how history and ecology keep changing each other. Groups of people, and they bring their things, and then that changes something that changes, just over time. I won a bunch of prizes with that one, but we shot some of that in the river parishes. I'm trying to think what else. As far as movies, with narrative movies, I never have there.
For quite some time, Louisiana's been trying as hard as possible to attract the media and entertainment business, people producing films inside the state. And I know that, Georgia's had a similar effort, and it feels like Georgia's kind of gotten a little bit ahead of the game when compared to Louisiana. Maybe that's not the case, but
no, I think it is. I think it is, and I think there are a couple of factors. One is the state of Georgia is much more generous in their, in their incentives. Two, Atlanta's a much bigger city,
right.
And the terrain is, more varied, probably.
Sure.
And the biggest in that cluster of reasons is the airport. Because you got direct flights to anywhere from Georgia.
Sure.
Whereas
Wow.
even in New Orleans, you get direct flights to Los Angeles, but there's not as much choice. And if you're anywhere else in the state, you're connecting.
Right.
And even in New Orleans, you're often connecting. So you got those two things. And then lastly is hurricanes.
Yeah. But one of the things is always in the depictions of movies, the criticisms of the actors, because many of them aren't from South Louisiana, and they're bad Louisiana accents or bad Cajun accents, or even just the bad storylines and stuff. I mean, you see the list on the internet, and I guess the latest one that has come up is, I guess, with Marvel and is Gambit, this character.
I don't really get bent out of shape about it. It's so hard to make a good movie. Yeah. And, when you see him putting on the bad accent, at least they're trying. At least they're trying. I always, even in the business, I always marvel at, you'll see the interview with the actor, Australian actors the most.
Yeah.
You see the interview with the actor and you go, how did they sound like that in the film when this is how they sound in daily life?
Yeah.
I mean, how they pull it off. What you're always dealing with on set with accents is if they're concentrating on that, what are they not concentrating on? Because you only got so much bandwidth up here.
Yep.
And if that's an issue, and do you really want to lose takes? I mean, we call, when you do a scene, you'll do it each shot, each bit of the action from multiple angles usually, and you'll do it repeatedly, and we call, each repeat is called a take. You haven't moved your camera, you're just doing it again sometimes for technical reasons, usually performance reasons. And do you really want to lose takes because they mispronounced, a word, or just the accent went off, or they slipped out of accent, which often happens. Something that's already good, because again, you have so many hours in a day. You have so many hours in a day, you're not going to get any more.
That's a definitely different perspective to look at it from what I think most audience people don't really realize, that aspect of it.
Right.
Yeah, a 90-minute movie takes a lot longer than 90 minutes to make.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
And it's full of compromises, full of so many compromises from what you envision in your head and what you can manage to get on the screen.
Right.
And accents. Is it better if they don't have an accent? They're playing, and what if they're British?
Right. You think about all the all those old movies when we were growing up that were shot in the 30s and 40s, and if they were supposed to be in France during the Revolution or something, and they were all speaking English, they weren't trying to mimic a French accent.
1960s, there was a very popular television series called Combat, and it was a patrol in Europe during World War II. And their translator was called Cage. It's called Cage, Consider the Cajun. And it was modeled after, a lot of Cajuns were used as translators.
Right.
Yeah.
But this guy was speaking, you know, I mean, it sounds like book French if you hear it. I mean, it's definitely not Louisiana French. If you want somebody like-minded, you got to get Shane Bernard on your show. You got to get Barry
We have
Oswald on your
actually
show.
Shane and I didn't
Because
see
they
it.
go ballistic over this stuff.
Well, you see, it's funny you mentioned Shane because we did have him on the show, and he was taking the tack that he's like, I'm not on a crusade to, because I'm like,
Yes.
well,
Maybe he's off the crusade.
sounds like we got our next episode. We'll get Shane and Glenn on together and just kind of duke it out.
No. I remember getting letters from Shane that he's trying to get everybody to sign, protesting to Paramount or whoever for depictions and stuff. Again, I not that I'm supportive of doing that stuff, but it's more that I'm sympathetic to just you're being pulled in so many directions when you're making a film.
Sure.
And we don't know. First of all, it's hard to know who was really in charge, and sometimes nobody's in charge. Those are the stereotypes. But, it's impossible to know whether this is something they purposefully did callously without looking into it, or is this something that they were just a little clueless and too preoccupied to have it hit the radar, or whether it's a battle they lost and they fought on the side of the angels and just got overruled by people of the food chain or by circumstance. And you don't know. There's no way to know.
Yeah.
I think of the, of course, one of the things people complain about, and, when I watch something like Waterboy and Adam Sandler's Cajun version, I don't take offense at that because
Shane's favorite movie. Yeah,
I'll laugh at it because I know that's one of the things that the Cajun culture is supposed to be able to at least laugh at yourself and self-deprecating humor to a certain extent. And to me, I just think of it as it's in a fictitious version of South Louisiana, and it's just a humorous story, and it maybe it pokes a little fun at some of the things, but I don't like it. I mean, dislike it.
If I had made Waterboy, would I have been run out of town on a rail, or would all my neighbors and friends and relatives felt in on the joke? And
it's a good question.
And I don't have an answer. I don't know. But a lot of that, because I mean, look at any of the 10,000 Boudreaux jokes.
Right.
Yeah.
That don't make Cajuns look any smarter than they did in Waterboy.
No, right. Exactly. That's kind of what I guess I was getting at. You can't always take everything so seriously, but
no.
But I thought Armand Asante's accent sounded pretty good in the Bel Air Cajun movie, but
he was good.
Obviously,
he was good at it.
Yeah.
You've got three things you got to worry about when you're making a film. One is the look, and that's real important, especially for certain kind of films that transport you to another place in time and stuff. You got to build that world, but they will forgive holes in that. And next is the story. I mean, you have to catch in the beginning and hold them and surprise them and make them feel things, and then build to crescendo and then let them down at the end.
Yep.
And again, audiences will forgive holes in the story if it's by and large working. If it's not completely confusing, or it's not something they've seen 5,000 times.
Right.
And then there are the performances that you get from your actors.
Right.
And that is what gets us invested. That's just what's, creates the emotion within us that mimics or corresponds to or counters whatever the emotion those people are, those faces on the screen are feeling. And that's the place, if you fail, the audience doesn't forgive.
Right.
mean, bad acting, you pulled out of the movie, and it's hard to get them back. Once
Yeah.
once you lose an audience with one scene, it's hard to get them back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you are putting that thing together, you know, how do you get the best performances? How do you enable the actors to relax? How do you relax them enough
Mm-hmm.
so that they can become these other people
Right.
Yeah.
in a very artificial situation? But I mean, you talk about your 14 lights.
Yeah.
No, I mean, imagine 140 lights.
No.
And,
It's because I know how much that costs.
and
So,
even the little movies I made, you know, because I never was Spielberg. There'd be 120 people on a crew
yeah.
standing around. We had one. I'll leave you one last story. I keep saying the last one. We're doing this scene. We're doing this movie, and there's one of the actors. And whenever you interview an actor, you ask him, "Can you swim?" "Oh yeah, I can swim." "Can you do that?" "Oh yeah, I can do it." "Can you ride a horse?" "Oh, I'm great on a horse." Well, they want the part.
Right.
Doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so sure enough, one of the actors in what was a Western, had never been on a horse in his life. And so I talked to the head wrangler, the wranglers who are in charge of animals on set. I talked to the head wrangler and said, "Look, need a gentle one for this guy. Pick your most gentle horse, and that's what this guy's going to ride. I don't care what it looks like. That's what this guy's going to ride, because otherwise it's going to be an issue."
Yeah.
So we do the first scene where he's on horseback, and it's fine. It's perfectly fine. And then, we're shooting other stuff, and then we get back into another scene on horseback, and that horse is like jumping around and wants to throw him and trying to brush him off against a tree and stuff. And he's like, he's terrified. And I'm terrified. And I get the wrangler. I say, "What is this? You told me this was a gentle horse." He goes, "Well, it is a gentle horse, but he's Buddy Sour." What? Because he's Buddy Sour. There's this other horse that's his friend. And when his friend's not around, he gets anxious.
Mm-hmm.
So what do? He goes, "Well, we probably ought to get his friend here." So we lose like 40 minutes while they go get this other horse. So not only do you have the actors in the scene and 120 people on the crew standing around, but the camera's here, I'm here, and here's this horse that's not in the scene. So he can calm down the horse that is in the scene. I mean,
wow.
And you deal.
Who would have thunk it, right?
Yeah. And so, if the accent slips, well, let's just get through this.
That's your least of your problem.
This has been a joy. This has been fun. Really
Thank you so much, Glenn.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. This has been great. Looking forward to actually are the LSU project that you're doing, is that going to be available for people to view online?
Eventually, I'm sure it'll be online eventually. It's got some film festival play coming ahead of that.
Okay. Sweet. Okay, cool. Well, just keep us updated if there's a place, because we can update this episode and point people to the footage if it makes it up on YouTube or something like that.
Will do.
And link to all your to your Cote Blanche website, and so folks can find you. I know you got also a YouTube channel too through that as well.
All right, Glenn. Thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate it.
All right.
And
bye.
All right, well, stick around, folks. We'll wrap it up here in just a second. So, thank you all for watching. Thanks for tuning in. It's always a pleasure to share these guests with you guys, and also just to be able to explore things that, frankly, a year ago I would never have had the thought to talk to these people. And the fact that you guys keep watching and they see that and they say, "Oh, well, this is a show that we want to come on," because they know that they're going to reach not only a broader audience than when we first got started, but they're being seen by people that appreciate what they have to bring to the interviews. So, thanks so much for supporting us in the channel and just being there for us. It's been a great summer. I mean, I could not even have planned to have so many awesome guests on the show. I don't know how. I mean, where do we go from here? I don't know. But let's just say that we're not giving up. We're going to shoot for the stars and see what we get.
Oh yeah.
So
we hopefully we got our, using the fishing metaphor, we got our lines out in the water.
Yeah.
And got, hopefully we got some potential spots to go check out. So we'll find out.
DJ Rhett's gonna go, y'all catching?
Yeah, that's catching.
So no, we're not catching yet.
Yeah.
Maybe we're catching.
One day we'll catch him.
But if he would just, get back to us every now and then, that would be super cool. Yes, we're calling you out. So anyway, please do us a huge favor, like and subscribe on your way out the door. We definitely appreciate that. The algorithm appreciates that, and it means that more and more people get a chance to view these very cool interviews.
And if you have any suggestions for us of who we can talk to or who you'd like us to talk to,
yes, please do.
Throw it out there. We'll see what we can do.
Yep. David's had to do some favors for you guys, just saying. So, only so much I can do from Seattle, but David's he's got connections, so
promise some melatones, but
only so much to go around.
That's right.
Okay, well, thanks folks, and we will catch you on the next one. Take care.
Right. See y'all later. Bye.
There he